This evening to our public hearing for our 2019-2020 budget. At this time, I'd like to call our public hearing to order. We have 3 speakers that have signed up to speak this evening per our policy. And if you'll indulge me, I'd like to go over board policy with you. Each speaker will be called by name, and you'll be asked to come to the dais at the end of the podium here. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes, and there's a light system. When it gets to a yellow light, that means there's 1 minute remaining. And when, of course, the red light comes up, your time is expired. Abusive language per policy KCA and personal attacks aimed at students or staff members is not permitted. All speakers are expected to behave in a orderly and respectful manner. The board will not engage in discussion with the speakers or respond to comments, and the superintendent will designate, if needed, a member of the staff to respond to any speaker that might have a question or a concern in a timely manner. So again, thank you for being with us. At this time, Mrs. Levinus Wells is going to operate the timer. Thank you very much, Linda. Matt Boone. Matt, if you'd please come to the podium at the end of the dais, and we thank you for being with us.
My name is Matthew Boone, and I teach 7th grade ELA at Northwood Middle School. I first want to thank Dr. Royster and his team for listening to the teachers this year. On multiple occasions, we were invited to collaborate with the district to find ways in how to retain teachers in Greenville County. Many of the initiatives we suggested did not cost any money, but will still make and help teachers feel valued and appreciated in the classroom. I believe we are still at a crossroads in education. At my school, there are a dozen teachers who can't make ends meet. They work 2nd and 3rd jobs, and they are exhausted before the day even begins. And we are highly qualified, and we have master degrees. The budget proposal helps rectify some of these problems. Teachers do need an increase of salaries by 4 to 5% for next year because Greenville is growing. This year, my school received mental health counselor, and it has really made a difference. We've seen a lot of changes with our students and being able to go and talk to this health counselor. Imagine how additional support in all the schools would look like. And finally, we need commitment to raise the starting salary to $40,000 for Tier 1 teachers. Greenville is the best place to live, and that's why we need to support our teachers. Thank you.
Our next speaker in order is Shelley East. Shelley? Sherry, I'm sorry, Sherry.
Oh, excuse me. Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak with you this evening. My name is Sherry East, and I'm a high school science teacher for 27 years in the great state of South Carolina from the Rock Hill area, but I'm currently serving as the president of the South Carolina Education Association. So I'm here this evening to commend your superintendent, Dr. Royster, and the school board for your budget that does actually support many of the initiatives of the South Carolina Education Association. I also want to recognize our folks in the audience tonight, some of our teachers, that it's their very first time attending a school board meeting. So through this year of engagement and the teacher crisis, it has let teachers find their voice on how to engage with their elected officials. So I would like to share some startling, alarming facts with you that you've probably heard from the SARE report. Is we are in a critical stage of a teaching crisis in South Carolina. 5,300 teachers left last year. 1,000 international teachers had to be hired. We started the school year with over 600 vacancies, and I only imagine that's going to be worse across the state this year. The more startling thing or alarming statistic is that higher ed is only producing 1,400 new educators a year. So if you do the math, we are in trouble. So, and it's not just in the state, it's nationwide. So the SCA's legislative agenda this year had 5 basic things: a pay increase across the board, which you're doing, a class size reduction, which is included in your budget, less testing, behavior for safer schools to include mental health counselors, and you've included more counselors for the schools. And we really advocate for some protected time, some duty-free time, and you are taking steps in that right direction with that. We have a long way to go around protected time for our elementary folks and our high school folks. With the extra testing came along extra planning times that reduced our planning. So I also would just like to say thank you again for supporting those teachers, for allowing us to visit with you. We have visited your schools this year and found some amazing things that are going on in Greenville schools, and we enjoyed visiting and meeting with the students and the teachers. So in conclusion, thank you very much for your time this evening and your work toward helping support our educators and students.
Thank you, Sherry. Now we move to Shelley Smith.
Thank you. My name is Shelley Smith, and I'm a social studies teacher at Travelers Rest High School, and I'm also our Greenville County Schools Teacher of the Year. First, I would like to thank Chairman Sailors and members of the board for your willingness to advocate on behalf of the teaching profession. I have witnessed several of you in action this year. For example, as I watched several hours of testimonies given to our legislators in Columbia, I saw Chairman Sailors in support in the audience, and also listened to Joy Grayson speak to the Senate Education Committee about the proposed model code for ethics for the local school boards. This has been an exciting and at times stressful year, yet promising year of positive steps, which many of you have played significant roles. And as a teacher in our district, we thank you for that. Positive steps have also been taken in our district this year, centered around creative approaches to the challenges faced not only in recruitment, but also in retention of top quality teachers in Greenville County. This year, I want to thank Dr. Royster and his administrative team for listening to the multifaceted concerns of educators and be willing to put these changes into action in the budget proposed for the 2019-2020 school year. The proposed budget increases the salaries of all Greenville County School employees by about 4 to 5%, an emphasis on raising teacher salaries, an average of about 6.5%, and the starting salary to $40,000. This will make Greenville County Schools more competitive to attract top quality teachers, but also is a positive step towards elevating the teaching profession as a whole. As a high school teacher, the emphasis placed in the budget to provide mental health counselors and additional support in our schools is a must. At TRHS, our mental health counselor's caseload filled up almost instantly the moment that she walked in the door. And if our students are self-identifying the need for this service, then this is something that we should be willing to invest in. Also, the emphasis on elementary school teachers, reduction of class sizes for first grade teachers. There's a step in the budget right now to reduce that from 19 to 1 to 18 to 1, and I think a continued focus on moving that to 15 to 1, which is crucial. Reducing that class size at the age where students are learning how to read affects them through the rest of their educational career. So I personally believe that this budget is an incredible first step in elevating the teaching profession, and I'm asking you for your support. It places emphasis on the importance of education and the importance of it being more than just a minimally adequate education for our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our public hearing. The board will convene at 6:30 in open session to discuss and receive the second reading of our budget. And with that, our public hearing is now adjourned. Thank you. And we will call our meeting to order for the second reading of our fiscal year 2020 general fund budget for May the 21st, 2019. At this time, I'm going to ask Dr. Royster if he will make the presentation to the board and to the community for tonight's meeting. Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Mr. Sailors. Good evening. It's my privilege tonight to present to you for second reading our budget. I do want to provide a little context for the budget first, and then a brief summary of the items included in the budget, though you have a tremendous amount of detailed information that you received in the work session, you received in response to answers to your questions, and at first reading. There is no substantive change to revenue. In fact, the House and Senate have both now acted, and our revenue is locked in based on the version we've already sent to you, and we had no change in the expense. We do want to review at least the primary expense items. First, as we talked about at first reading, I think a good theme for our budget is our mission first and people always. If you look back at student success, we're ranked 14th overall across all measures of academic attainment school districts throughout the state of South Carolina. That means taking every measure of academic attainment that's given on a statewide basis and ranking districts 1 through 84. And we come out with an overall 14th ranking, up 5 places from 19th in 2012. Our students continue to outperform the state and the nation on the SAT. More than 86% of last year's juniors earned a ready-to-work credential based on worldwide interactive network testing, WIN testing. During the 17-18 school year, our students earned 1,642 industry certifications and potentially more than 16,000 college credit hours via AP, IB, and dual credit courses. More than 80% of our graduates continue their education at a college or university, either 2 or 4 years. Last year's senior class earned $138.9 million in scholarship offers. This represents an immediate return in our community's investment in education. 2012, sort of a benchmark year, that was the year we began to come out of the Great Recession. So we've provided a couple of reminders here, a few reminders, of the things that have happened since 2012 based on budgets recommended by the administration and the actions of the school board. So you can see as we go through a few of these that the things we present this year are not only a logical next step in the process, but also reflect the items included in the 2023 blueprint for our long-range strategic plan for the next 5 years. Since 2012, we've provided annual steps and salary increases for teachers, which moved the average teacher salary from 26 in the state to the top 5. We've provided annual salary increase for all non-teaching personnel, made up the teacher salary step that was missed in the midst of the Great Recession, returned the student-teacher ratio to pre-recession levels in 1st through 12th grade, initiated a 0.5 baseline flexible instructional allocation, which was increased to a 0.75 to every school in the district, adjusted supplements for academic and athletic coaches to ensure competitiveness, increased funding for band uniforms and instrument repair and replacement, increased funding for extracurricular transportation, lowered the ratio of teachers to students for English language learners, reduced the student counselor ratio to reach 250 to 1 in FY20, increased instructional coach days, returned staff development funding to pre-recession levels, assumed maintenance of all school athletic fields, increased school counselor days, added AA days for elementary schools that have no assistant principal, added special education positions to improve student services by creating classes so that these students could remain in their home-based schools, added 4 regional security specialists, and further expanded law enforcement zone patrols. All those things since 2012. And you see tonight's presentation is a continuation of those type efforts to ensure that we position our students to be able to achieve the greatest levels of success possible. If you look in the FY19 budget, to give a perspective, we obviously are a people-oriented business. Not just our product, not just who we work with every day, but the manner in which we carry out our work. We spend $564 million on salaries and benefits. The reason that building is so much smaller than that person is we only spend right at $56 million in all other expenditures related to the general fund and the operations of the school district. Now, if you look at the people, these are all the people. The reason the one to the left is the largest person is that $363.4 million, which is over 64% of our budget, those are regular classroom teachers and aides. The next biggest person are people that deliver instructional services directly to students in schools. The third largest person are the operations people at the school level. Those are people that are physically housed in a school, primarily our custodial staffs and plant engineers. The next person, next in size, are school administration, principals, assistant principals, and AAs. The fourth person School clerical, 2.7% of our budget. Those obviously are the clerical personnel directly serving and supporting activities at the school. The last two columns, the last two people, district employees, the one to the left in the last bracket, $31 million, 5.5%. Those would be all the district maintenance employees, those who go out and make repairs in schools. Those would be the individuals that process the paperwork to do employment, to ensure that people get paid correctly and on time, to pay our bills. It also includes all of our bus drivers, transportation supervisors, and other personnel, because they're not actually housed in a school, though they provide services directly to students. And the last and final column, and the person that you can almost not see up there, that's district leadership and management. Those are the people in our district at the level of director and above. Anyone who's a director all the way up to the superintendent, that's the percent of the budget, of the general fund budget. Now, if you look at all the budgets, they represent an even smaller percentage. But of the general fund budget, 1.3%. That's where we're spending our money with people. The rest of the budget, the other $55.9 million, you can see by that graph where that's spent. Fixed costs like insurance and utilities, instructional materials, instructional support, payments to charter schools, technical and data processing. And you can see what that represents of the total amount if you look at the circle to the right. That's simply a narrative explanation of the different categories. If you look back over the last 10 years, where have we spent the increases in our budget? Well, those increases from FY9, just before, right at the very beginning of the recession, through the current, total $190.7 million more dollars. The big bar to the left, that's unfunded and underfunded state and federal mandates. The second bar, that's personnel for growth. We grow a certain number of students every year. Our personnel at the school level are formula driven. It's where those formulas show we should add teachers, counselors, clerical personnel, assistant principals, whoever it might be at the school level. Or when we have opened new schools, personnel for growth. The third column, that represents salary increases that we were not mandated to do. That's where you would find the amounts of increase that cause us to be able to move our teacher salaries into the top 5, as well as the salary increases for all the other personnel in the district. The next green bar, the small bar above the line, that's where we've transferred cost. Funds that were previously sent to us from the state in EIA, where a dollar is a dollar, and the state transferred them to EFA, where for us, a dollar is 70 some odd cents. That was transferring the difference, the 30 cents difference, so we could continue to pay the people that were paid out of those special revenue funds. The last two bars, which represent, I believe, around $1.2 million in reductions, those are reductions over that same 10-year period in other parts of our budget. So that shows where we've spent the increases and the net over time. Summary of our FY20 general fund expenditures. As I mentioned earlier, you all have heard all the details on this, but just as sort of a refresher and a reminder. Primary points. The approval of this budget would ensure that no teacher in Greenville County be paid less than $40,000 per year. We believe your action tonight, if you adopt this budget as recommended, would put us in a position to be the first district in the state to be able to say that district-wide. No teacher in Greenville County will receive less than a 5% raise. It's by adding a step at 5% for teachers at the end of the schedule. So the ones on the very end would get at least 5%. In other words, they're off our 30-step schedule. That's 7% of our teachers. So they'd get 1% more than required by the state. Teachers with 3 to 30 years of experience will receive varying increases based on their steps. The steps vary in height. So our teachers from 3 to 30 years would receive 5 to 9% increases. Teachers from 0 to 2 years of experience will receive, obviously a 0-year experience not receiving an increase, but an increase to that cell. They'll receive double-digit percentage increases to ensure their salaries for 0, 1, and 2 are at least $40,000. So no teacher in this district with the passage of this budget would receive less than a 5% pay increase. Recognition of the value of all employees to meeting the goals of the district by providing a 4% increase or a step, if they're still entitled to a step, and you know those scales don't go anywhere near 30 years. If their step's less than 4%, it would be adjusted to ensure they received minimum 4%. Those that are no longer entitled to a step would get 4%, and if their step happened to be more than 4%, they would receive that legitimate step. A minimum 30-minute daily planning period for all teachers, reduction of an add point in elementary class size from 3 over the allocation ratio to 2 over, which has the effect of reducing class size. Reduction of first grade class size ratio from 19 to 1 to 18 to 1. Both of those items are in your long-range strategic plan. The goal over the 5-year period is to get first grade to 15 to 1, where we know that research supports that academic attainment is positively affected, and we want to do that in the grade that's most critical to literacy and reading success for our students. Reduction of middle and high school counselor ratio from 275 to 1 to 250 to 1. As you recall, this year we went from 300 to 275. State mandated employer retirement and health increases, growth for student population, increases related to the next grade roll-up at Rudolph Gordon, and the entire year employment of the new principal at Fountain Inn. You see some other, in our size budget, more minor items, exam fees, items for teacher recruitment. Now, funding for teacher certificate upgrades, that's over $1 million, related to teachers who go and earn a master's or master's plus 30. In other words, they move up in a level. District school leadership development, another small dollar item in the larger budget. Then 6 FTE special ed teachers to continue to carry forward the concept of putting those self-contained classes into students what would be their home-based school. 2.0 FTE school psychologists and a district fire and burglar alarm support technician to increase the staff there in response to the size and complexity of the systems we maintain. Again, those are the high points of the budget. I think it recenters on the mission first, people always, and Mr. Sailors, we're certainly available to answer any questions, but we have no further presentation other than for me to simply restate the revenue the revenue that we based our first and second reading information on from the state is now locked in, House and Senate version, at the amount that we reported to you, and the first and second reading expenditures remain exactly the same.
Thank you, Dr. Royster.
Yes, sir.
Before we move into questions, I would like to place on the record the reference to policy DCE under financial. Item number 2 says that the annual budget shall require a minimum of 2 readings before ratification. At the board's discretion, approval of the budget may occur at any reading after the first reading. All questions from the board members arising from a reading shall be answered by the administration prior to the next reading. Questions? Mrs. Levinas-Wells.
Thank you so much, Chairman Sailors. Dr. Royster, first of all, let me say that thank you for your presentation. I find, having a background in both law enforcement and education, that these are all careers and professions are very important, but these are equally important. And I know both professions, they constantly are working double jobs just to make rent and to provide for their families. And I think this is a great opportunity. I am one that very seldom will vote for millage increase. Very seldom have I ever. But when it comes to education and safety and all that these professionals do, I cannot think, and we did not have one person show up tonight, and I tried to get the word out to everyone. If you have a question about our budget, because you're always coming to me, make sure you come from 6 to 6:30. And the people that I heard that spoke tonight were pro-support. Get our teachers what they need in order to educate our children and bring them into a career and give back to the community and give them the best education that they so deserve. And with that being said, I can't thank you enough for your budget and for Mr. Knox always giving me the information, because I had questions about, what properties pay property taxes in the district general fund and so forth, and he wrote everything down. And I will find, I found something interesting, because it said that the free in lieu of taxes, and it gave the list of those. And when I read, Michelin, 3M, Kemet, BMW, and so forth, I read, that they pay a fee to the Greenville County Schools General Fund rather than property taxes. But those corporations bring so much to our district and offer so much to our students that I found this just very enlightening and very appreciative. And so therefore, my question, Jeff, is just how much would one millage equal for someone to pay out of pocket? If it's me, what would be probably the least amount or maybe the most amount that would come out of my pocket? Let's just do a $6 million on a car. I'll give you that easy one because I give it to you every year. And so I know you're prepared for this question because that's what I do.
What value?
My car?
What kind of car?
It's a T-Bird. It's a 2004 T-Bird. Or I can, or a Honda. Let's do a Honda Civic. A Honda Civic, a 2000. Let's say a 2000. I don't think 2014.
Well, while he's calculating that, I think maybe the answer you might be looking for is, for those of you who primarily live in your own home, which is exempt
Right.
from school operating taxes, for most people, what they pay taxes on would be their personal vehicle.
Right.
Unless you bought a new car or a newer car, your taxes this coming year will be less than your taxes this year. Even with the increase, unless you bought a new car or a newer car. The depreciation on a car, the minimum depreciation, Mr. Knox, is 5%.
Minimum 5%.
And the tax increase of 6 mills is
4.3%.
4.3%. So unless you get a new or newer car, doesn't
Right.
have to be
So
absolutely
that
new.
makes me want to vote for this even more so. So I just want to thank you, Jeff. I know this will be the last time I get to ask you about a car tax because you're retiring. But with that being said, I love you and I thank you for all that you've done for us in the budgets and your staff. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Royster.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Lewis?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to speak to this budget. Last week there was a panel discussion about education, and Ansel Sanders was on the discussion from Public Education Partners. And the thing that he talked about that I thought was really important is this idea of professionalizing the sector, that at the end of the day, we need to look at the teachers in these buildings and decide whether they are here for jobs or whether this is a career that they've chosen. And for me, a key part of that is having them have the ability to advocate for things that are important to them. And when I look at the survey results from last year's survey of teachers, when I look at kind of what has happened, particularly as teachers contact me about what's important to them, I mean, we hear about things like increasing teacher pay. We also hear about things like decreasing class sizes and increasing access to mental health counselors. And I'm just really excited that this budget, to me, reflects, I think, the priorities that those teachers have been advocating for this year. So I'm excited to support this budget.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Wells?
I have a couple of questions, but they're just kind of to make sure I understand what we've got in the budget. The increases associated with student growth, we talked about this at the budget workshop. The 2.273 includes, in terms of staff, how many staff are we adding with that? We've got teachers, we've mentioned other school support staff.
But, you know, that changes. We start doing that in February. The principals get their first baseline prior to Shining Stars. So it will literally change all the way up to and through the beginning of the school year. So until we've done all of those, we don't know, but they're basically formula-driven positions. So it will be a mix of those, but we have a count of how many we've done to this point. I don't know if Stephanie has that. You have the count of how many we've done?
We've done 28.
Okay. So we've got, some of that includes Career Center teachers for program requests. Are those in our Career Centers, or are those going to be in our high schools?
It could be either place. For example, there's a request right now from Riverside High to add a health occupations teacher because they have a waiting list equal to the load for a 1.0 FTE growth. So we've looked at growth both from a pure population growth, and in career courses, we also look at it from the standpoint of program growth.
Okay, so you don't have a breakdown right now of how many Career Center teachers you're adding in that number and how many special ed?
No, and again, that would be a moving target, but 28 have already been allocated.
Okay, okay. The other one, briefly, is the survey, the teacher survey instrument, the $150,000. So that's $150,000 recurring dollars.
This is a recurring line item. Total, does it decrease over time, or will it likely remain the same?
Okay. So
And that's the one we piloted very successfully earlier this year in some schools. It gave back much more comprehensive data than our previous and our current survey does. It also provided a national database to compare to as well.
Okay. And it,
So you can see where you might have made, and the experience we had with the principals where we piloted that was there was noticeable difference between Administration 1 and Administration 2 because they had the opportunity to focus on some things to move the needle on those things, which is far different from the survey we have now. It really, you go from the end of one year all the way to the end of the next year before you get good feedback on it.
so it's is it site-based license? Is that, or it's one district?
One.
Okay. And that, okay, so that's the 150 is specifically for the licensing of the software, not any other administrative cost.
It's sent electronically. It goes back to them. They analyze it electronically, and they send us the results.
Okay, okay, cool. Well, I'd say, like Mr. Lewis, I'm excited about the priorities that are in the budget. I'm excited that they reflect what we had in the strategic ed plan, that we all worked so diligently, getting feedback from our teachers, from our families and our students. I think some of it, too, to talk about going back to 2012, we have done a lot of work since 2012, and so much of it really supported the same things that we heard very clearly this year were important to teachers. When you talk about mental health counselors and reducing guidance counselor rates, we started that journey a long time ago. So it's really makes our job, my job certainly as an elected official, rewarding to hear what we've heard from our teachers, from our families, from the community about what their priorities are, and to be able to continue that message. So thank you for the work. Thank you for responding to the board's questions. I think we always need to dig in and ask you the hard questions when we're establishing a budget and when we're raising millage. But I think you've done a thorough job of helping us with that, and I'm happy to support this budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wells. I agree with you that it makes all of our jobs more easy, more rewarding. Dr. O'Connor?
Yes. Dr. Royster, first of all, I'd like to say to the staff who worked on answering our questions that I recognize, especially with the special ed questions that I asked, that it took an extraordinary amount of time. And I appreciate it so much because I know how busy everybody is. And it really was not an exercise without meaning, because as we are talking about lowering class size, which this board and community have placed as a high priority, especially for reading and as a way of addressing teachers' concerns too, I want to make sure that when we bring in special ed students who are in self-contained classes to give them a regular education experience, that we are not putting them in extra large classes, because that's not really a regular education experience that benefits them or the other students in the classroom when the class sizes are too large to address the individual needs for any student in the room. And I think that I understood from the data that we got back, so my request and ask is that we should include those students who are in self-contained classrooms but being pushed in or included in regular classrooms for a part of the school day in the teacher-student ratio. Because if we don't, we can end up with a classroom growing over the school year as they do, and also the push-in taking place that sometimes involves another adult coming in and sometimes does not. But I think that when we are hitting those bubble numbers, which have been 3 or more in a classroom before they get additional assistance, and thank goodness in this budget we're moving that to once 2 above the suggested ratios are in all the classrooms in that grade, we will provide assistance. I just believe it's imperative that we try to make sure that those special ed students are included in the consideration of those ratios. Otherwise, we're saying you are one of us, but we're not going to count you. And I think that there's a bother in that. Although I know the care and attention is high and lovely, and as it should be, I think this board would want to say, but we want to know that you have our support in recognizing that these students' needs need to be treated just like anyone else's, which is, we don't want you in a class of 29 any more than we want any other student in a class of 29, but if we're not counting you, that could happen. So I think from the data you said that 80 classrooms in the district, I believe 17 schools have such programs, but only 80 pushed over the 3 above the suggested ratio.
Before you give too far off that, actually that's 80 core subject areas,
right,
not 80 classrooms.
Okay, 80.
So
okay,
if you look at the 4 core subject areas, total 80 times it gets to that number in the 4 core subject areas. So we're talking about 1/100th of a percent.
right, and I, you know,
So,
not to be objectionable, but I just, the percentage, if it's 1/100th of what it doesn't matter as much as what it looks like in an actual classroom, even if it's only one actual classroom, when there are already 28 students sitting there, and then you have inclusion coming in, sometimes without an additional aid coming with them. So according to the data we got back, there were 80 in the core subject areas, but some of those had students going out at the same time, and some of those had an adult coming in. That left 47 classes where there were over 3 above the recommended ratio, where no adult was coming in with them, and we were sitting at very high numbers. So I'm simply asking that as a result of this incredible work that you did in helping to prepare this for the budget conversation, that be a direct part of the conversation when planning is done at the beginning of the year or whenever the numbers are being discussed, that maybe someone would reach out to a principal, or they would understand that they should reach out to say, by the way, we've got 4 inclusion students in 3rd grade or 4th grade, and we've got already 26 lined up in every 4th grade classroom scheduled for fall. That should be part of the consideration in establishing the additional teaching support that they might get, so that they fall within that +2, just like anybody else would. That's my request as a result of this, and as you said, it's a small percentage affected, but that should mean that we should easily be able to manage it. Having said that, I haven't been this excited about a budget in years, and I am thrilled at the recommendations that you have made, the direction that this board and this district together have taken with you to get here. This is the first time that we have reached that magic 20/50 to 1, and I remember talking about that maybe 10 years ago for the first time, for the 250 to 1 for the guidance counselors. And that still sounds like a huge number, doesn't it? But that's the recommended number for the Guidance Counselor Association, and the first time we've hit it. So it is, as you said, a step in the right direction, and we're making it. And other than what my colleagues have already said, it occurred to me that what I love about the budget is that in these changes, I would think that I would be more likely to come to teach in Greenville County, to stay in Greenville County teaching, and to drop my children off knowing that they would be known, connected, and successful here. And I can't ask for any better than that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. O'Connor. Ms. Levinas-Wells.
Mr. Chair, one thing before, Bert, I'd like to thank you for considering every position in this district, custodial, bus drivers, everyone that will also get this 4%, at least 4% increase.
Yeah.
I think it's important that we know that everyone that works in Greenville County District contributes to our children's educations. And with that being said, I'm going to make a motion to accept the budget as presented.
Okay, I have a motion made and properly seconded. I know Mrs. Goodwin-Caldwell had already asked for. Mr. Meek, should be approved, correct?
I think it needs to be more detailed than this.
Okay.
Okay. So I make a motion to accept the 2020 general fund budget as presented by the school district, with the millage increase of 6 mills. Sorry, I left that one out, didn't I? But if you're going to accept the budget as presented,
Well,
that was
no,
it.
but you need as much detail as possible.
Okay.
I agree, Mr. Meek. Thank you.
Did I get it, Mr. Meek? I don't want to leave anything out because I want these people to get what they so deserve.
Okay. You got a question, Mr. Meek, about the motion? Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm okay with it. I was going to coach her through it, but we got it okay.
Do what now?
I
was going to coach her through it, but she did okay.
I've never
I'm
made a
just
motion to
amazed.
approve a budget, so
That's
you know, this was something different for me.
I'm sitting here.
I'm having a little
I've
heart
always
palpitation.
disagreed with it,
No,
so
I'm
this
sitting
is
here-
something new.
I'm sitting here aghast that she's making the motion. Okay. Okay, so, okay. Michelle, you're next.
Seriously, that's real change.
I'm waiting on
Thank
lightning,
you,
I'm waiting on
Linda.
lightning to strike.
Thank
Did
you,
you get a
Linda.
second?
No,
I didn't
lightning.
hear
Wait a second. The second was by Dr. O'Connor. Yes.
Thank you.
I don't think lightning is gonna strike, but I am so glad that the district is finally listening to the people that filled out the surveys, the teachers, the community members. We finally listened to them. But I did want to ask about, I see the only thing I see in here for HR is HR teacher recruitment and the teacher survey instrument. I've been asking for years about district-wide professional development for classroom management. Do we have that? Or, I mean, is that anywhere whether it is district-wide, not school by school, but do we have that? Because when these new teachers come in, they're coming in from the schools and they have no training. You need to know how to manage your class in order for you to instruct it.
Yes, ma'am. That's in, for the new teacher, the days we put in earlier last year, and we put those days in for the new induction teachers. Those
Right.
2 days last year, and we're adding more to that this year. We do behavior management, all 4 of those days. We don't do just one session. We do an overview session, but then we model that throughout the sessions that entire week. We model classroom management strategies for those new teachers. In addition to that, then we also do, it would be optional, but we also do trainings at schools as requested, and then we also do trainings at Summer Academy in the summertime. But all first-year teachers get a fairly intensive behavior management class over those 4 days. This year will be 4 days.
Okay, so I see in the budget right here, it only says 2 days, so it's really 4 days?
It's 4 days for first-year teachers, 2 days for second-year teachers.
Okay, and I would also like for us to look at adding culture sensitivity training in some of that professional development training.
So that is, so that is part of ours. I think we presented a little bit on that a couple months ago. That's part of our multi-tiered system support social emotional framework.
Okay.
So we are rolling that out. Now that's not widespread yet because we're still getting our bearings and we're still learning to do it right.
But eventually it'll be
Oh yes,
widespread.
yes ma'am. That's part of our MTSS framework.
Cool. I am so glad about this budget also because, I mean, this is an educator's budget. I am so happy that Miss LaVentus Wells is voting for us to do it. I mean, because you gotta have money to run this thing, and that $6 million increase. I am so glad that you are voting for it, Linda. But but she made a motion. I don't have to make a motion.
Anything
That's
else?
all. That's
Okay.
all. That's all, Chuck.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Meek, you got anything?
If you're getting ready to vote, just repeat the motion so I can understand it and hear it all at one time.
Sherry, can you repeat it as you recorded it, please?
To accept the fiscal year 20 general fund budget, which includes an increase of $6 million.
It was made by Mrs. LaVentus Wells, seconded by Dr. O'Connor. Any other questions? Mr. Sudduth.
In looking at the budget, Dr. Oyster, we're asking for a $6 million increase.
Yes, sir.
So I was wanting to focus on what that $6 million increase would give us. And I'll base that upon when Mr. Meek asked if we only had 5 meals or 4 meals or 3 meals on down to 0. So if we didn't do a 6 meal, but if we did a 5 meal increase, what would that take away from us? So I was just trying to make sure the budget is fine. If you have a 0% increase in millage, it would still be a good budget. But I wanted to focus on these 6 meals for just a minute to make sure that I understood when we're talking about those, and I'm going to assume that the answer that you gave to Mr. Meek was the correct answer as to what we would lose if our millage was not 6 meals, but was something underneath that.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right, so that's what I'm going to base it upon. We're going to, I assume we're going to need an additional 14 and a half school counselors, and that's going to cost us $1.2 million. The technician I'm fine with explained to me we're going to reduce the class size for 2nd and 3rd grade and from 4th and 5th grade. That we're going to add 33 new teachers. That's going to cost us $2.5 million. additional out of the, that's why I'm saying what the millage will enable us to purchase. All right, if we look at the reduction, is it going to be a same reduction for the second, third, and fourth and fifth?
If you look to the question that was asked, in other words, if a 6 mil was not approved, what would we recommend be removed? And that's the way we answered the question.
That's what I'm looking at.
All right, so from 6 to 5, we would recommend you not do the counselors and take out the fire and burglary technician. If you went from 5 to 4, we take out the counselors, the fire and burglary technician, and the class size reduction in second and third grades. That's to go from the +3 to +2. If you went from 4 to 3, we'd recommend again the counselors come out, the fire and burglary technician come out, second and third grade come out, the fourth and fifth grade come out, the CTE certification fees come out, and the Career Center instructional materials come out. If you went from 3 to 2, additional counselors come out, certified fire and burglary technician come out, class size reduction in 2, 3, 4, and 5 come out, the CTE certification exam fees come out, the Career Center instructional materials come out, and reduce the salary increase for non-teaching personnel to a 3% across the board, no step cost of living adjustment. If you went from 2 to 1, all those same things, and then eliminate the first grade ratio reduction. And if you go from 1 to 0, all of those things we just said, and then cut in half the 30-minute planning time for teachers so they'd have 4 a week instead of 5. So basically the only thing you'd have, if you don't do a millage increase, would be the raises that we recommended for teachers, starting pay of $40,000, 5% for those off the scale, the 4 to 9% for those still on the scale, 3% increase for all other employees, and the personnel we'd need for growth. And that'd be all you'd have.
Understood. We went from 6 mills to 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1 to 0.
Yes, sir.
But does that have to come out exact as it was stated in there? Could I take a little bit from one and something from another else?
Well, we were asked for our recommendation, and if you all were to choose not to go to 6 mills, that's our recommendation. Of course, our recommendation is for everything we included in the budget and that you adopt a 6 mil increase.
If we look at the CTE exams and the Career Center materials, that's not much. Looking at Dr. Royster, the salary increase for support personnel.
Yes, sir.
Am I correct? We're going to give them a 4% across the board increase at a cost of $7 million?
If you adopt the budget we recommended and the 6 mil tax increase, they would get a minimum 4% increase. If they're still entitled to a step, many of them are on a step schedule. It's between 9 and 12 steps. If they're entitled to a step, they get the step they're entitled to. If that step were less than 4%, they would get enough to make up the difference where it is 4%. So if their step were 7%, they'd get 7. If it was 2, they'd get 4. And if they're off a step, they'd get 4.
In order for everyone of them to get a 4% increase, it's going to cost us $7 million, is my question.
Is that correct, Ms. Knight? I don't have that page in front of me.
That's correct.
Yes, sir.
All right, then my last one then. The 30-minute teacher planning time,
Yes, sir.
that's going to require an additional 73.5 full-time equivalent personnel.
73.5 FTE instructional aid personnel, classified personnel, not certified teachers. $2.758 million.
All right, just explain to me what we're going to be getting for those 73.5. What kind of certification? What are going to be their responsibilities? I understand we want to give every teacher a 30-minute period in which they will have a planning period.
They would not be certified teachers. They would be qualified instructional support personnel. They would do things, if you think back several years ago, we had science labs. They could do science labs. They could do computer-assisted instruction. Academics have a number of models that they've developed that they could use. They also have the ability, the principals do, to propose to their assistant superintendent and to the associate superintendent for academics a model other than the ones that have already been developed by academics, and those can be approved to be used. Could be career exploration. They could do any of a number of things that help support instruction but not delivered by a teacher. If we were to try to do that with teachers, you'd be looking at about double the cost. That would be one issue, it's the cost. The second, and probably equally important issue, if we tried to expand art, music, and PE, I'm not sure we'd find enough art, music, and PE teachers to expand that much. That was as much a concern as the actual dollar cost was.
Yeah, and I'm not advocating that.
Yes, sir.
And I have to be, I'm just looking at, we're going to spend $2.758 million for 73.5 people that aren't certified.
Yes, sir. What we're spending it for is to ensure that elementary teachers have a planning period each of the 5 days of the week.
But I was wanting to make sure that what we're spending the money for these personnel is going to be worth $2.7 million. I don't want 73 people just sitting in there and being kind of a keeper of the students.
No, sir.
I want some kind of instruction taken on.
And that's why they have to either follow the models that academics has developed, or they have to get approval for a substitute model.
Yeah. You know, if I ask for more, Dr. Roster, then I am trying to do your job for you.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not, and then I have no intention of doing that. But I do want to make sure that when we're spending money, and say well, there's going to be support personnel, I understand totally that every teacher would love to have a 30-minute planning period. And so that gets that done, so I'm not opposed to that at all.
Yes, sir.
But I would be interested in knowing these 73.5 people that we're going to hire, assuming, and I'm pretty sure that the budget's going to be passed,
Yes, sir.
that as to we'd have some kind of update on exactly what kind of people we were hiring, what they're doing, how they're assisted, so that I do not want to be able to say, well, they're just there to babysit.
We would provide the board sometime in the fall after it's all set up and done. We'll provide you a little follow-up at a committee of the whole meeting so you'll understand exactly what models are in place, a little description of the model, and if there's something different than the district models, we would include that as well.
Thank you, sir. That's
Yes,
all,
sir.
Mr. Sailors.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Shamley?
I would like to say I appreciate the questions and all the work that's been done on this budget. When I was considering running for this position, one of the things that came to my mind was, we have to decide as a school board, as a community, just what it is that we want to do with our children to educate them. That may cost a little, it may cost a lot, but we need to decide that. Then we need to figure out how much it's going to cost. And if it's going to cost too much, we may need to cut some things out here and there. I've been through this budget. I am by no means a budget expert, but I've been through it a number of times, and I've tried to find some fat in there. And I suppose somewhere you might could find some, but I really have not been able to find anything that comes to my attention as being a major waste of money, resources, teachers, whatever it might be. So I want to, first of all, commend the administration, and in particular, of course, Dr. Royster and others for putting this budget together and listening to the comments that we've had 2 or 3 sessions before now, but as well as tonight, and welcome any questions that we need to have. But in my opinion, from looking at this and from the work that's gone through it, this budget meets what I would consider to be a well thought out, a well funded, and a very, what I would call inexpensive, if you want to use one word, or at least something like that, budget to educate our children. Do we have a little bit of a millage increase? I don't know that any great number of people are going to even notice that in their paychecks. Now, this goes for people that own their homes, obviously, And I do feel for those who don't own their homes because they will probably feel it a little bit different. That's just part of the problem that we have to face. Were it not for Act 388, my guess is we could have reduced the budget this year in terms of millage. So my vote would be, and I don't want to vote at this point, obviously, but my support would be for this budget the way it's prepared.
Thank you, Mr. Shamblin. Dr. O'Connor?
I'd just like to ask Mr. Knotts one question, if I may. Mr. Knotts, would you tell us again how much it costs just to take care of growth and inflation for this year?
Per the State Department Revenue Fiscal Affairs Office, they're recommending a 5.7 mil increase.
So I think it's important to point out that the state recommends for us a 5.7 increase just to cover growth and inflation. So this is a very modest amount beyond their recommended number.
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Correct? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I've got one comment if I could. This has been a rather shocking night for two reasons. Not only did Mrs. Levinas Wells make the motion, Dr. O'Connor and I actually were thinking the same way because I was about to ask the same question, Crystal. Okay, we have a motion properly made, duly seconded.
That's weird.
Yeah, there is. Let's get out of here before lightning strikes. There's been a motion properly made and duly seconded.
Roll call.
I'm going to ask for a roll call vote. Since Linda made the motion, I want to force her to make the vote. No, seriously. Ms. Sherry, go ahead, please.
Mrs. Bush? Yes. Mr. Chamley?
Yes.
Mrs. Goodman-Gallo?
Yes.
Mrs. Grayson?
Yes.
Mrs. Levinas Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Meek?
Yes.
Your heart's still beating.
Mrs. Morrison Fair?
Yes.
Dr. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Sutton?
Yes.
Mrs. Wells?
Yes.
And Mr. Saylor?
Yes, and for the record, it's unanimous. Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Mr. Sailors. If I might, two comments. One I should have made earlier. One of the keys to this budget was for the first time in many years, the legislature fully funded the teacher salary increase and the fringe associated with it. And I wanted to make sure I mentioned that at first reading. I wanted to make certain that I mentioned that tonight. And then on a general note, and then a more specific note, there are a whole lot of people sitting in this room tonight that had a part in building this budget. And I want to express my appreciation to all of them. That's not just people in finance, it's people throughout the organization, members of Teacher Forum. We consult and get their input. There are members that represent our principals. And a number of these people are here tonight. That we get the principals' input. They come to a consensus of what the principals believe ought to be in the budget. And then the final work requires hours and hours from our finance department. So I very much appreciate the hard work, the effort, and the thought that goes into this on the part of all those involved. And I would be remiss if I did not recognize that this is Jeff Knott's 31st general fund budget, Jeff?
Really?
Or 33rd?
33rd.
33rd general fund budget, not all in Greenville County, but it's his 15th or 16th in Greenville County. We could not have had a better executive director of finance, a person of greater integrity or ethics. We very much hate to see him retire, but wish him well in his retirement, and I want to recognize him as he'll be with us another month, but this is his last general fund budget. Thanks to all of you for your unanimous support of this budget.
Thank you, Dr. Royster. And with that said, the chair will entertain a motion. We adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Have a motion properly made, duly seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries, and we're adjourned. Thank you.